Hey everyone, Steve Martinelli here from KubeCon Paris. We're at day 3 now, and we're joined by Felipe Huici.
Correct.
Felipe, why don't you tell some of the viewers, who you are, a little bit about yourself, who you work for, what do you do there?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm the CEO of Unikraft. I'm originally from Argentina. I landed up in Germany, created a startup called Unikraft, and we've built Craft Cloud, which is what we feel is the next generation cloud computing platform. We call it the Millisecond cloud platform. Everything on our cloud happens in milliseconds, boot times, auto scale, and we think this is the way the cloud should be.
Nice. So, Unicraft, that makes me think, the word uni in the front makes me think you're using Unikernels.
That's correct. We're using Unikernels.
So, for folks who are like me and don't know much about Unikernels, what are they?
A unikernel is an extremely specialized virtual machine. When you go to the cloud, you know exactly what the application or language you want to deploy is. So it makes sense to build a customized virtual machine at compile time before you deploy it. If you do that, you get orders of magnitude benefits in terms of memory consumption, boot times, and so forth. And that's what essentially a unikernel is. Unicraft is an implementation of a unikernel.
Okay. So you mentioned millisecond stuff. That makes me think, how are you achieving those things? Are you using something like Rust or WebAssembly under the covers? How are you achieving those like millisecond boot times or?
Yeah, so Unicraft itself is a Linux compatible, from scratch built operating system that is fully modular. And what that means is that you can fully customize each of the lines of code and pieces that each application needs and nothing more. So if an application doesn't need a line of code to run, then it doesn't make it into deployment.
Okay. So, and so I'm trying to piece things together here. Does that mean that the OS image size is fairly small then?
Exactly.
Okay. And I'm making a connection back to containers now. How does that relate back to containers for me?
Yeah, so what we do with containers, so what happens when you deploy a container on the cloud is underneath, you still have a virtual machine.
Right. Okay.
So in a sense, you're getting a double isolation, a layer of overhead in a sense, right?
Yes.
Because ultimately what you want to run is your application. What we do instead is we make it so that the application is as close to the bare metal as possible. We make a very specialized virtual machine. But containers are really useful at build time.
Right.
So on our platform, everything is built around Docker files.
Okay.
So you run a one line, you specify in your Docker file your application, what your files might be, if you have a web server, what you want to serve, and we take that as a recipe, and we build a unikernel, a specialized virtual machine based on that. We transparently convert it to this very specialized virtual machine, deploy it, and then you get your application with your files, but booting in milliseconds.
Nice. So you mentioned running on bare metal, and I know you're actually a customer of Equinix.
Yes, we are. Secrets out.
Oh yeah, secrets out there. So what made you choose Equinix as compared to some other options that you had out there?
Yeah, so first, locations. You have a ton of them.
We may have a few. 250 data centers worldwide. It
Give
helps.
or take, right?
Give or take.
That was one. The other one is we really like that we can bring up a metro very quickly. So servers on Equinix can be brought up in a minute about, and they can be brought up very reliably.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of providers where you kind of say, please start this, and you need to do that 6-7 times until it actually comes up for whatever reason, right? Equinix also has APIs that we can query. We don't like dashboards very much.
So are you using the CLI? Are you rolling your own or using Terraform?
We've both. So we use first we started the dashboard, then the CLI, and we're doing a bit of Terraform now, yes.
Nice, okay. So you're accessing the API through all the ways.
Through all the ways. Also, your dashboard is way simpler than any of the other dashboards out there, but I guess you know that.
But there's always room for improvement out there.
There's room for you to complicate it still.
All right. Okay, so I was going to ask you, so you're firmly in like the startup territory. Do you have a background in like, what's the company size right now? And, how did you get started in this?
Yeah, so at present we are 11 people.
Okay.
And then sort of rewinding back to 2012, 22. So we were part of a research lab where we spun out. I mean, basically what was happening is we were going with this technology to top-notch operating system conferences. That was 30% industry, and the industry was coming to us and saying, that's great, can I run it in the cloud, or can I run this other application? We were like, we're just a small research group. No, right? So at some point by the Linux Foundation, we started to get some momentum, and at some point it made sense to kind of spin out
Nice.
and go commercial, right?
So it's really your first time into this whole, I guess, were you involved in open source communities beforehand, or is this really your first time kind of, working with the Linux Foundation?
I mean, this was the first time. We kicked it off back in roughly 2018-19.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can say I'm a dinosaur of that open source community, but yeah, this was our first open source project. Really, we were doing minor contributions to others, but this was the main one.
That's awesome. And so it's a really interesting stuff that you guys are working on. Do you envision this kind of becoming like the de facto way of how applications should be running?
Yeah, I think independent of the actual tech, the vision of you should never pay for idle again. Things should be immediately on and then immediately off when not used. If you get bursts, autoscale should be immediate. I think this makes a lot of sense, right?
I love that. You should never pay for idle again at the application layer. Yeah, what a great tagline. That should be your tagline.
Okay.
Never pay for idle again.
I'll take a mental notes and I'll go to the printer after this.
So, and that's walking around here, you see a lot of like cottage industries pop up because, now that the cloud has become the de facto way to deploy things, now you see a bunch of other cottage industries like help control your cloud costs.
Yeah.
Bring in these experts who will help you control it. Install this tool, will help you control that too. But realistically, it comes down to discipline, right? You can have these things in place, but unless it's like going to the gym. Unless you have the discipline to do it, you're never going to actually do it. But if it's there by default and naturally, then you might actually be able to control that cloud cost.
Yeah, we're trying to get into a paradigm of set it and forget it and have peace of mind that if you're being charged more, is because you have useful business traffic coming to your instance, right?
Exactly.
And also that your costs are not being overblown. We're also completely API and CLI based. So you run one command, you know what you're running, right?
That's perfect. Going back to what you were talking about, why use Equinix Metal, you had mentioned that you specifically need to be running close to the silicon, as close to the hardware as possible. And that's something we see time and time again on the Equinix side. So I'm very glad to hear you say that. What specifically, I guess, do you need any specific hardware, or are you using any hardware that we have on the cloud?
So, so things like NVRAM, SSDs, as much as possible running things in RAM is good for us, but also bare metal because the specialized virtual machines are one component. But if you deploy them on a cloud stack and controller that's super slow, then your boot time is going to be 1 minute plus a few milliseconds. And so overall it's still 1 minute, right? So what we had to do is build a controller from scratch that can be reactive in milliseconds and scale to thousands of instances.
Okay.
And for that, we need to be able to install that controller, not some hyperscaler controller, right? So we needed bare metal, and then we needed to have full control on that platform, right?
And it's funny, and when you're talking about reacting to things at the millisecond level, you and I were chatting earlier, you were mentioning, when burst traffic comes and auto-scaling. You had mentioned that, what was it you were saying about how it takes a few minutes to react when really those bursts come in the millisecond range, and being at the minute level is not good enough, right?
Right, exactly this. So we also have logic and special proxies that can sort of keep track of when traffic is coming in, and it'll just sort of buffer the request, talk to our controller. The controller will dimension things very quickly. Then the traffic gets released, load balanced, and then all your requests get answered, and that whole process in milliseconds.
That's awesome. One thing I've been asking everyone is, what is something that you're excited to learn about or do while at KubeCon? I know it's day 3, maybe you already did it already, but what was something that you were really happy happened here?
What was really cool is to get feedback on what the platform is and whether this resonates. Don't pay for idle, things reacting in milliseconds. We had a bunch of people kind of tell us, do you have a random number generator for your millisecond boot times and this is all fake? Please explain to me the magic behind it. So it's been really good. And also the wide range of use cases out there that all collide on the fact that people are paying for idle, right?
Yeah. You got to go to the printer right after this. Never pay for idle again.
I promise. But I love get your control freak on as well.
That's one of the fundamentals about Equinix is that when you need a fine level of control, we're there.
We're freaks, we're control freaks, so this is why we're here.
All right, Felipe, thank you so much for joining us today. It was wonderful talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
See you later.